Can you see God? If you look, if you're sensitive, if you're thinking and absorbing and understanding. Could you live your whole life and not see God? Yeah, many do. It's our choice. But this is how God created reality that's completely Him and could be oblivious to Him completely. We are in the middle of chapter 6. In chapter 6 of Tanya, we are looking at the majority of our lives, which is dealing with our animal soul. The construct of a Jew is a human body within which there is a godly life force, a piece of God Himself. And there is another energy, which obviously originally comes from God because everything comes from God. But as it comes into our body, the God energy is very covered over. It's somewhat accessible. That's called our animal soul. And then there's a far lower piece of God's energy that is far more concealed, and that's called our evil inclination. And every Jew has the godly soul on one side and the evil inclination, which generally controls the animal, on the other, battling over me, battling over you. Are we going to serve God or not? So today, what we're saying is that everything in this world is God's energy. If it wasn't God's energy, it wouldn't be. The only building block, the only matter that we have is God energy. That's it. That's the only option. But if we look in our world, there's a lot of things that seemingly oppose God. And of course, that's deliberate design, meaning God is in everything there is. So the most holy, the most sublime, God revealed. The most evil, all of the horrible terrorists, Iran, the proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, Saddam Hussein, Ayatollah Khomeini, God energy. The only thing in this world is God energy. So why would God take His energy and allow it to vivify something so horrible? Because ultimately, God wants us to have choice. If everything in this world was an overt revelation of godliness, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. And what are we doing? Us and the angels, it's exactly the same. We would sing praise to God forever. It sounds beautiful, but it's almost pointless. The angelic service is beautiful, but not really giving God anything. We in this world can actually give to God. We are the only players in all of creation that can give to God. Why can we and we exclusively? Because this world, the God energy is so concealed that we have in this world an existence that's spiritually referred to as klipa. Klipa is the shell, the barrier, the husk, that which conceals God. And when a Jew uses that item that is vivified by klipa and gives it to God, either directly uses it to serve God or uses it by controlling himself and not doing what he wants to do, but what God doesn't let, which is also a service of God. When we serve with that klipa, with that barrier of God energy, we transform it, we elevate it, and we give it to God. So in our world, the only world where we have klipa, where we have this barrier on God, is therefore the only world where we can give to God, where God receives something he didn't have before. A new energy is released every time we, the Jew, serves God by using items of a certain dimension of klipa, called klipas noiga, which is permissible, but still barriers and husks and shells, giving it to God like anything of the physical world that's permissible, or anything that's forbidden, I serve God by not doing it, even though I want to. And that way I also crush that evil and give it to God. So only in our reality is klipa, is evil, is the barrier of God. Only in our reality, therefore, can we give this to God? And therefore, only in our reality does God get something out of creation. Think of a spreadsheet, your pluses and your minuses, your gains and your losses. And it's like level on level of creation is loss, as we'll discuss soon what I mean by loss. Loss, the more technically correct term would be minimization of God's energy, minimization, loss. Until we come to our reality, the only physical reality, all the other realities are purely spiritual, but real, spiritual is real. When we come to our physical reality, there's the worst, the lowest, seemingly the greatest loss, there's klipa, there's the barrier, that's which obstructs God energy. And therefore, for the same reason, only here we can give to God by using that klipa itself, crushing it and transforming it and giving something new to God that never existed before. And therefore, in this world is the gain of all of creation. And that's what we can do because there's klipa in this world, because there's what we're going to call evil, the barriers on God's energy. And you could say a pen doesn't look very evil. Could be far worse than a pen, right? So is a pen evil? It's receiving its vitality from a level of klipa that the God energy is still very accessible, klipas noiga, but it's not straight godliness. Actually, almost nothing in this world is straight godliness. Almost everything in this world is klipas noiga, God energy very much concealed, but still accessible in all the permissibles of this world. And of course, some things in this world, some items, thoughts, speeches, actions, feelings, are receiving their vitality from what we call klipas tameos, which is a level of a barrier so intense that I can't access the God energy. I serve God by not using or doing or indulging in any of those things when I want to. So God, by bringing klipa into this world through tremendous loss, he sets the stage for our freely choosing to serve him. So therefore our service is ultimately valuable, not like the angels who are absolutely serving him, but there's no choice. So there's not much value, but we have choice because there's all the godliness energy and there's all the other stuff and we have to choose. And because there's klipa in this world, we actually can give to God. We can give him something you never had before, which will be fully manifest by the redemption, by Mashiach, when all that God energy will be so revealed and God will be uncovered in ways that God himself was never uncovered for all of time, even prior to creation. That's what our work is doing. It's a very deep thought, but 100% true. And we will, God willing, to see it with our own eyes. So all of that is the backdrop to what we're going to talk about now, because now we're talking about, so how did God minimize himself? Meaning we have things in this world, not just pens. We also have, like we said, Saddam Hussein's and Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and the Houthis. How is God in that? That's anti-God. But God's in it. If God wasn't in it, it wouldn't exist. So how could God exist in such anti-God matter? So the answer is because God enormously constricts himself. Constriction after constriction of so the God energy can get so small, both inwardly constricted and covered over, for that God energy to survive inside these layers of klipa, of barriers, and be there and not fly away because no way can it survive there. That comes through tremendous crunching and squashing and constriction self to get in the antithesis of God, the anti-God energy, the klipa, the barriers, the husk. Klipa is also God energy because everything is God, but it's a very great minimization of God, whose job is to constrict and conceal that God energy, either that it can shine weakly through anything from klipas noiga, or we don't even sense that shine at all. Anything completely forbidden, anything klipas tameos. So what the rep is now going to tell us is there are two major techniques God used. The two terms that we're going to use, two Hebrew terms, yesh me'ayin, which translates as something from nothing, and ila va'alol, which translates as cause and effect. These two terms, cause and effect, and something from nothing, ila va'alol, yesh me'ayin, are two strategies, two techniques through which the godliness is minimized enough to exist in this world, both in the pens and microphones and cell phones of this world and in everything completely forbidden in this world. Because again, the only matter is God. The building block and every other detail beyond the building block is God matter. There's nothing else. So that God matter is so constricted to be not visible at all. We're constricting, and then we have layers and layers covering over that smaller and smaller. So in the end of the day, we could not be aware of God at all, which of course is our world. Can you see God? If you look, if you're sensitive, if you're thinking and absorbing and understanding, could you live your whole life and not see God? Yeah, many do. It's our choice. But this is how God created reality that's completely him and could be oblivious to him completely. These two terms, yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, and ila va'al, cause and effect, they work together. Yesh me'ayin, which is a term probably more people are familiar with, something for nothing, means something from nothing. The nothing, which is really the ultimate something, is a higher spiritual level, is a level of God energy. The something that emerges from it is a far more diminished spiritual energy. So we have energy of God so constricting itself that what comes forth from it seemingly has no relationship to it at all. There's no relationship between the something that came from that such high level, we're calling it nothing. So God, we're calling it nothing compared to the substance, which of course is all spiritual, but the relatively speaking substance of the something that came from it. And basically, that's the transfer from spiritual world to spiritual world. So we know in our solar system of the spiritual galaxy, there are 4 spiritual worlds. Silas, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, the world of being, the world of creation, the world of formation, the world of descent. From one world to another, it's a something from nothing movement. If we take that top of those 4 worlds, Atzilus, the world of being, the lowest edge of Atzilus, of the world of being, when it breaks into the next dimension, nothing of Atzilus comes forth. Nothing of that world of being. It's so low, it can't produce anything on the level of Atzilus, of the world of being. So what comes out is a totally new reality. It's the highest edge of the world of Bria, of the world of creation. And that edge of the world of creation, and that lowest edge of the world of being, the world of Atzilus, have no relationship. This, the highest edge of the world of creation, Bria, is like that something that came from the nothingness of the lowest edge of the world of Atzilus, of the world of being. I don't see any relationship between the two. If you would tell a child, you see this piece of paper? You see this tree over here? This paper comes from this tree. The kid would be like, what? Piece of paper, a tree? What are you talking about? Obviously, there is a relationship between the piece of paper and the tree. But I'm using that as a metaphor for the highest edge of the world of Bria, the lowest edge of the world of Atzilus. What? That's the movement of something from nothing. Again, nothing meaning a such higher God energy that what's coming out from it is a thing, substantial, form. Doesn't seem very godlike, though of course this is all spiritual, so it's a very minimized God energy. And I don't see any connection between the two. That's something from nothing, which is the movement between worlds. What's happening within each world is the movements called Ila va'alul, which I'm loosely translating as cause and effect. Let's start at the upper edge of the highest of our 4 worlds, the world of being, the world of Atzilus, which also comes from a something from nothing, because relative to what came higher than Atzilus is a tremendous thing, a tremendous diminishment, a thing meaning a diminishment, because God is insubstantially real substance and totally, so to speak, insubstantial. So beyond Atzilus, beyond the world of being, that's like nothing compared to what emerged, a thing, a world, Atzilus. So we have this first highest moment of Atzilus. What happens now? What happens now is thousands of small incremental steps of descent. And that's called Ila va'al, cause and effect. I'm going to give a parable to explain this. If you have a teacher, okay, I'm the teacher. I have a class, you, but nobody showed up to the class except Simone. I'm like, oh my gosh, no one here, Simone. It's just me and you. I'm going to teach. So I'm the teacher. And Simone is a student. And I teach her everything I can. Okay. Now, Simone is a wonderful student, but she's not a teacher. So I don't know what percentage of what she absorbs. So I'm the teacher. She's the student. I'm the cause. She's the effect. But now Dot calls Simone and says, hey, I heard you were at school today. I missed. Simone says, don't worry, everybody missed. Dottie says, did Mrs. Turen still teach? He said, yeah. Oh my gosh, can you teach it to me, Simone? And Simone says, sure, of course, I'd love to. So Simone now gives over to Dottie everything she absorbed. Now, when Simony is teaching Dottie, obviously Dottie's not getting everything that Simony knows. At this moment, Simony's the teacher and Dottie's a student. And then Sarah calls Dottie, and then Rachel calls Sarah, and then Bracha calls Rachel. I think you get the point. So the teacher to the original student. The original student now becomes a teacher to another student. And that student becomes the teacher to the next student. And that student becomes the teacher to the next student. And that's how it continues. And obviously, each time it's getting less and less because each person, what they absorbed and then what they can give over, it gets smaller and smaller. So in the metaphor, we see a movement where the person starts off as a student and then becomes a teacher. And then the one they gave to, that student, then becomes a teacher. And then that student is a student who becomes a teacher. And that's exactly what's happening, so to speak. Ila v'Alol means cause and effect. The initial cause of the world of Atzilus, the world of the being, the highest energy, constricts itself to give over, so to speak, to the next level. Ila, Alol, teacher, student, cause, effect. Now this effect, this student, constricts itself for the next emanation that comes from it, which now the student became the teacher. The effect becomes the cause. The Alol becomes the Ila. And then from there emerges the next effect, which becomes the cause of the next effect, which becomes the cause of the next effect. So if those words sound strange, just think back of the teacher-student. I'm the teacher, Simony is a student, then she becomes the teacher to Dottie, then Dottie becomes a teacher to Sarah, and Sarah becomes a teacher to Rachel, then Rachel becomes a teacher to Bracha. So you're the student of the teacher higher than you, and you're the teacher for the student lower than you. The cause produces an effect. The effect becomes the next cause that produces an effect. That effect becomes the next cause that produces an effect. That effect becomes the next cause that produces an effect. And so it goes on and on. Why are we calling this cause and effect and not something from nothing? Because in something from nothing, it's such a gap. We don't really see how this came from this. We don't see any relationship, right? The paper from the tree. But in cause and effect in Ila v'Alol, you see the relationship. Like a parent to a child to a grandchild, you see the resemblance. You see the relationship because it's not such a vast jump. It's a smaller minimization, which then produces a smaller minimization, which then produces a smaller minimization. It goes on and on until we're done, meaning until we can't squeeze anything out anymore, until we reach the lowest level authentic to this world. Authentic here, we're saying to the world of being, to the world of Atzilus. And we get to that last effect that we can't squeeze anymore. Anything that will come from it no longer belongs to the world of being. It's too low for the world of being. That movement from that last effect of the world of being can't squeeze anymore, can't get anything out. You're ring, nothing's going to come out. That would be integral to the world of being, to the world of Atzilus. At this point, we're going to have a jump. And this lowest level of Atzilus, of the world of being, is now moving to produce the highest level of the next world, of the world of Bria, of the world of creation. And between those two levels, that's Yesh Me'ayin. That's something from nothing. Because I don't see any relationship between that highest level of Bria and that lowest level of Atzilus. We will now read this inside. Second page of chapter 6, about 11 lines up from the bottom of the page. Sheyordim mimadrega lemadrega, that this energy, they, meaning this energy of God, descends from level to level, revavos madrigos, tens of thousands of levels, bishtalshalos ha'ilamos, the progression of all the worlds, the progression of the worlds, hishtalshalos, which means this chain, because we have interlocking, as we're saying, the lowest level of the highest world producing, emerging as the highest level of the next world. So we have 4 of these worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Siya, being, creation, formation, and descent. Ila v'Alol, through this technique we just explained, Ila v'Alol, cause and effect, Vitzimtzumim rabim. And additionally, not only are we diminishing and diminishing through Ila v'Alol, we also have constrictions that's fetching it smaller. Until this light becomes so small, miut achar miut, diminished more diminished, smaller and smaller, until this God energy could so constrict itself to be engarbed in exile. Now we think we're in exile. God's in exile. God is in anti-God matter, so to speak, in klipa, in that which covers and blocks and obstructs and denies God. That's the most intense exile there could be. God's within this, vivid, and the item, energy, it could be a thought, it could be an action, it could be a spiritual entity, is not aware of the God energy inside of it, because if it was, it would self-destruct, right? Imagine if the Nazi suddenly finds out he's a Jew. What does he do? Kill himself? So you have God energy vivifying that which is denying God, and it cannot be aware of it at all. Later in Tanya, we'll discuss this more, and we'll find there's more nuances and sophistication to what I'm saying. But at this moment, we're taking it simple. It's an exile. The anti-God matter, the klipa matter, that which obstructs and conceals matter, cannot be aware of the God inside of it, or it would cease to exist. So it's in exile, took also davar hanifrad, within that which is separate. Now, of course, nothing is separate from God. If something was separate from God, it wouldn't exist. But which has this illusion of separation. Truly, everything in our world has illusions of separation, but there's less and more extreme visions of the separation. And when we're talking about something of klipa, something which is a barrier to God, there's a very intense sense of separation, of I exist separate from God energy. But that God energy is inside of it. To give it life, to give it existence. As we said, using also this technique of from nothingness to something of substance. So it shouldn't revert to the nothingness, to the pure God energy that it was initially. In other words, God is working very hard, so to speak, constricting himself intently so he can exist within an energy that denies his existence, that opposes his existence, that fights his existence. And he's going to stay in that existence. And he's making himself so small. Imagine God energy could be so small that existence is not aware of the God inside of it. But God is inside of it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be. And that's the tremendous accomplishment of God, to use that term, to so crunch himself, to so squeeze himself, to so constrict himself that he's within that which opposes him. He's vivifying it. And that which opposes him isn't aware at all. He is completely clueless that his energy inside himself is God. I think it's an amazing thing to understand. It's a very deep, profound thought. And I think it also gives us a lot of hope. If we think of all the things in this world that seemingly are fighting God, right? Anything that fights the Jewish people is fighting God. Anyone that hates the Jewish people hates God. Jews and God, one entity. You hate God, you hate the Jewish people, you hate the Jewish people, you hate God. You fight God, you fight the Jewish people. We've seen this through all of our history. And you know what? All of those things that we're talking now about, people, forces, they're all vilified by God energy, which means ultimately it's a facade. It's a mirage. It has no substance. Fighting God, it is God energy. It wouldn't exist without God energy. It can't do anything except what God allows it to do. So it's another layer of reassurance, because sometimes evil seems to have a lot of power. Anti-Semitism seems to have a lot of power, but it's all God matter. And obviously it only has the power God chooses to give it at that second, and could remove from it in any second, because it's all God matter. When other, lahavdil, not to compare, but in man-made thought systems, the vision is God versus the forces of evil. They think in the end God's going to win, but there's still a fight of God versus the forces of evil. We understand there's no versus. There's no God versus anything, because everything is God. And even that which seemingly opposes it is God energy. Crunch so small that it could be in that, but it's God energy. And therefore, nothing could ever oppose God. And therefore, ultimately, nothing can ever oppose the Jewish people when we're serving God, because it's all God matter. But until that's revealed, it doesn't look like that at all, as the Rebbe says. If we now understand how small God constricted himself That he could literally be in this matter that seemingly is opposing him, and he's there and he's incognito and not recognized. He made himself really small. Yeah, he did. And therefore, Nikra Olam Haza Umlaya, this world and all that fills this is called Olam HaKlipas v'Sitra Achra, the world of Klipa and Sitra Achra. Klipa again, Klipa is the shell, the husk, the barrier around the God energy. And Sitra Achra, which is Aramaic for the other side, refers to everything that receives its vitality from Klipa. This world is called the world of Klipas and Sitra Achra, the world where there's all these barriers on God energy, the world which is primarily the other side, because it's true. Because almost everything of this world receives its vitality through the barriers of Klipa. Meaning we have very few things in this world that are direct God channels. Like, for example, our godly soul. That's very rare in the mass of this world, something of direct, in the Hebrew called Kedusha, direct, straight God channel. No barriers, no husks, no limitations. Everything else in this world, 99.9999999% of the world, is coming through Klipas. Now, as we said, in Klipas, we have two broad categories. Klipas Noiga is a shine, a light. So these are a little more subtle barriers, a little more refined barriers, that the light of God shines through them. And that's everything permissible in the world that we could use, access, release the God energy and give it to God. And then we have things in this world that are coming through much thicker coverings called Klipas Tameos, impure barriers, husks, coverings, shells that we can't access that God energy at all. And that's why it's forbidden, because there's no benefit to us except in rejecting it. The majority of this world is Klipas Noiga, not Klipas Tameos. Meaning, if we're looking at the things of this world, the substances, the items of this world, almost nothing is Kedusha, straight godliness. But there's far more that receives its energy through Klipas Noiga, through a channel that I could access the God through it, than Klipas Tameos, a channel that I can't access the God through it. But even though that's true, and even though the majority of this world is receiving its vitality from Klipas Noiga, and therefore it's accessible, and therefore I can use my cell phone and use it for God and elevate the energy in it, but still, if you're getting your energy from Klipas Noiga, which is more transparent to God's energy, if you're getting it from Klipas Tameos, which is a total obstruction, a wall, I can't access the God in it at all, still both of these categories are Sitra Achra, are the other side. And as we've learned, the other side means not God's side. There's God's side and there's the other side. And the high majority of the world, as the world starts initially, is the other side. Comes along the Jew, comes along us, and we can take items from the other side and shift it to God's side when we use it for God. And all the matter of this world that's permissible, that's getting its vitality through Klipas Noiga, through the level where I can access the God through the barriers, that is very naturally able to shift to God's side when I use it for God. And things that are on that camp of Klipas Tameos, barriers that I can't access the God, I can't as easily shift it, but I can crush and minimize the barriers through rejecting it. And as I do so, I weaken the power of the other side. But as it starts off initially, it's a world of Klipas and Achra, and therefore, well, my side has a custom. This world is a harsh, evil place. This is a world where evil people have control. Now, obviously, this is not the world as we envision it now, because it shifted action by action. Every time we think a thought, negating ourselves to God, every time we have a feeling for God, every time we do an action for God, every time we have a speech for God, every time we take an item of this world and give it to God through our service, we're minimizing the power of the other side and adding strength to God's power. So after 5,700 plus years of doing this, the balance has really shifted. And that's why when we look at the world, we don't and hopefully shouldn't see it as a harsh, evil world. We should see it as a world where Mashiach is emerging and where there's more and more sign of God, more and more freely visible in the world. But this is how it started off. And we see this in Kabbalistic sources, as the Rebbe references, K'moshe Kosu, Be'etz Chaim, Sharman Beis, so Perek Daled, as is written in the Eitz Chaim. The Eitz Chaim, of course, is the writings of Reb Chaim Vital, who recorded the teachings of the Arizal. So we are up to a side note. In the body of the text, the Rebbe said, oh, this is a bad world. This is a harsh world. Evil people have a lot of power. And what the Rebbe reassures us in the side note is, and remember, God is absolutely found exactly here. God is within this reality. To understand how God is within this reality, space, like time, is a creation. It's a tool. It's a technique of our physical world. So therefore, when we speak of the four spiritual worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, the world of being, of creation, of formation, of descent, we picture them like 4 levels higher and higher. And being is like, wow, that's way up there. And then a little closer and a little closer. And it makes sense in our brain. And it's okay to think like that. But no, that's not true at all. Because there's no space except in our physical reality. Our physical reality, of course, is the entire Milky Way galaxy. But that's all our physical reality. But spiritual realities have no space. So where are they? There is no where, meaning in essence, they're here. So the Rebbe says, I just finished telling you how God is so constricted, and this is a world of the other side, and the other side is anything that has as its root yeshus, self-identity, aggrandizement, separation from God, in contrast to God's side, where there's nullification and the revelation of God's presence. This is a world of all that other side, other separation, self. But within this world, where we're saying there's such a minimization of God, and that's true, but within it, there are the 10 holy energies, the sphere, the channels of God's expression of holiness of the world of Asiya, of the lowest of those 4 worlds, the worlds of descent. As is explained there in that Kabbalistic source in Eitz Chaim. And guess what? When these 10 channels of the lowest world, the world of descent, are the 10 channels of the higher world, the world of formation, and within them is an even higher energy from the even higher dimension, the even higher world of creation. So within descent, within Asiya, is the 10 dimensions of Yetzira, of formation. And within that is the 10 dimensions of Bria, of creation. And within those 10 channels, those 10 spheres, those 10 ways God reveals himself, in Bria are the 10 channels of the highest of the 4 worlds, the world of Atzilus, the world of being, Han, or Ein Sof Baruch. And you know what's within the channels, God's expression in the highest world of being, about the infinity of God. Imtza, so it comes out, or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the infinite light of God, which is within the world of being, which is within, then packaged within the world of Bria, the world of creation, which is then within the world of formation of Yetzirah, which is then within the world of descent, the world of Asiya. That's the energy in this world. So God's infinite energy is right here. So we find that the infinite light of God fills this lowest reality. Through being engarbed in the vehicles of God's expression through these 4 worlds of being, of creation, of formation, and descent, as is explained in those 2 sources. What did the Rebbe say here? What the Rebbe said here was this unbelievable reassurance, expression of the absolute truth. On one hand, I'm telling you, God is so constricted. How can I prove to you so constricted? Because he's within the pen. It's totally clueless. And he's within things a lot lower than pens. Wow. Did God constrict himself to be within and not experienced at all by that which he's vivifying? This tremendous constriction. And we have a whole world like that. We have this whole world of the other side, again, until we get involved and start shifting things. But simultaneous with that, because nothing's so simple, there's layers here. So on one layer, this is a world of the other side. This is a world of Klipos. This is a world of barriers to God. True. And at the same time, God's absolute infinity is right here. How is it right here? The Russian stacking dolls, the babushkas, guns, we're within the bigger ones, the smaller ones. So we have this outer copper doll, within which is a silver one, within which is a gold one, within which is a platinum one, within which is that absolute diamond. We have the outer casing, the energy of Asiya, of descent, the copper, within which is a much higher energy, Yetzirah, formation, the silver, within which is a much higher energy, the gold, Bria, creation, within which is a much higher one, the world of being, Atzilus of platinum, within which is the diamond of God's energy himself, of the infinity of God's light. And where's all that? It's right here. So the items of this world, they exist because of tremendous constriction. But just as we have those items, we have the energy of God right here with us, because this is the point and purpose. As we said, until here, it was minimization, descent, less. And you come here and there's a gain. The Jew gets involved. The Jew takes this item of klipa, what's receiving its life through the barriers and the husks, and the Jew uses it to serve God. And the Jew releases the klipa, the husks, and that God energy sends and becomes part of absolute holiness of Kedusha, the world of gain, the world that we're creating new energies for God that never existed before. This is where God is. This is where he wants to be. This is the domain of redemption of Mashiach. Mashiach's not taking place in planet Atzilus or any of the other spiritual worlds. It's higher than Atzilus. Any of the levels too high to be a world. Mashiach, the redemption, is right here. This is where God is. This is where he wants to be. And this is where he will be in his essence and being, completely revealed by the redemption. Essence and being perpetually, completely, without any barriers revealed. And that's what we're achieving by all that we're doing.
Simony, so much insight in tonight's lesson, because there is a struggle in me personally of the evil that we do see, and that's that we're supposed to hold on to and believe in and see it in what appears to be so dark and so evil. So this has been wonderful in the revelation that there is God everywhere. And now I just have to learn not to take on the heaviness and the darkness and try and see the godly light in that.